Hi, my name's Olivia, and this is my English writing exercise number 6 presentation for listening and walking marathon. So this week I visited 3 different locations. I went to Salmon Hole, which is in Upper Bidwell Park. The common place there is Bear Hole, but I went to the one further up, which was a bit of a hike. I didn't drive all the way up. I hiked all the way up, and I went and I actually swam in the hole and stuff. It was freezing cold, but it was fun. And I listened to part of a podcast that I'll get into halfway. And I was just like laying in the sun and listening to it. And then I also went to the forebay because I had rowing practice there at 5 a.m. And so I got to watch the sunrise, and I listened to my second podcast there as well as the first. And I just sat and I watched the sunrise after rowing practice and sat and looked at the water. It was very pretty. And then I went over to Lake Orville, which is a different part of the forebay. And it was already light out, but I looked at the greenery and everything. And I did that twice, actually, because I had rowing 2 days in a row. So I listened to 2 different podcasts within 2 days. And I chose the locations because I really wanted to go outside of the university. I wanted to go out where I haven't really gone. I haven't really gone to Bidwell, so I wanted to see nature there and see where I could hike, maybe go with some friends, or obviously listen to a podcast. Actually, was really nice, and I was in my own little zone, and I also exercised, so that was really nice. So these were some pictures. This is Salmon Hole on the far left. It was very deserted because Bear Hole is just the most common place, and it was freezing cold water, but it was refreshing. And then this is the forebay in the middle. You can see that was the boat that half of the team was on there early in the morning, and the sun was rising there. I also have a picture of it setting because I had a practice in the evening. I did not listen to the podcast then, though. And then this picture on the far right is Lake Orville. And this is just later in the day when I stayed and sat down on a bench and just looked at the water and looked at the little ducks. And then the 2 podcasts I listened to the first one was As She Rises. It was about 30 to 40 minutes long, and it was about Puerto Rico. I'm butchering that, but Puerto Rico and Hurricane Maria and what everyone had to go through, especially with because they're considered U.S. territory, but not technically a state. So it's U.S. territory, but the government was not at all helping them after the hurricane. And at the same time, there was a hurricane in Florida that was getting all the support. And so Puerto Ricans kind of were on their own, and it was a huge disaster. And it really went into depth on how there was a lot of suicide afterwards. And there was a poem that I really liked in it that it was based around that really talked about how a lady lost her family members and everything, and how she wrote the poem to not only like discourage people from dying from suicide, but also to talk about how the people who she cared about died from suicide. So she read it in Spanish and in English, and so it was really meaningful, like, to me, because of people I've lost through suicide. And I'm really glad I chose that podcast. And then the second podcast I listened to was Earth Speaks, and this one was interesting. This was kind of a hippie podcast. It was called Growing Inner Strength, channeled from goldenrod. And this picture in the bottom right is a picture of the plant goldenrod. And basically, she had traveled to Delaware, and she was walking on the beach and basically sat down next to the goldenrod and explored and focused on the plant. And then at the beginning, she was like, let's speak like as the goldenrod, like let's share a message from it. And I thought that was a little funny. But as I listened to it more, I really appreciated the message. And so This one, I wrote down quotes for each one. For the first one, I wrote this quote here: "It's not the same knowing the theory of the climate disaster than actually living through it. But you always think in some way deep in your heart that it's something that's going to happen later and you can delay it somehow." And that's what a lot of people thought, and how this lady who was speaking thought, which was kind of disturbing because it was a huge, massive hurricane. And then this second quote here is from the second speech, or from the second podcast. It was, "Reserve your best for those who deserve to receive. Reserve your best for those who are willing to meet your needs. Reserve your best for those who meet you where you're at, those who care to share, to give, receive, to be co-conspirators, and everyone meeting their needs." And that was supposed to be from the plant goldenrod. It's supposed to be like it's speaking to you. And so, as for reflection, I kind of listened to the podcast and they had different vibes. The first one was it was kind of dark. The second one was really spiritual and contemplative. So the first one, basically, I listened to it and tried to connect to the hardships and how much they went through. And I thought it was really deep, the way that they hurt and the way that they are still years after, because it was 2017, years afterwards, they're still rebuilding, still dealing with it. And then in the second podcast, I really found it peaceful because I was out at the forebay and I was really just looking at the plants around me and I was really connecting with it, and I found it really pretty to think about it, and the resilience that the goldenrod has versus human beings, because that was kind of the message, was really focus on your own strength and adapt to your environment. And that really just made me happy, and I looked around at the environment in a different way, and I just really thought it was just beautiful. I really liked it. And then as for questions, I didn't really have like specific questions because the podcast kind of answered whatever question I had, but I did really question the government after the first podcast. I thought that was really disturbing, how they really weren't involved at all. So, and then the second podcast, I definitely questioned her, not sanity per se, but more like, you're kind of hippie-like talking for a plant. But then I really listened to it more, and it was more not speaking from the plant, but what the plant represents. And I thought it was actually really nice, and the way that the goldenrods represented so much resilience. And I really liked it. I'm glad I chose that one specifically out of all the other ones. And then, thank you. This is a picture from Salmon Hole up before we have to hike down the cliffs. And it was really, really pretty. So thank you so much. And yeah, okay.